All righty. We're going to go ahead and just give it a few minutes to let folks enter.
All right.
I'm sad that this is our last session.
I know.
Just for now, though.
Well, I was going to say, and it was appropriate to end with like transition.
Yeah.
Yeah, what to do when your kids are older.
Exactly. But we're working on putting together some webinars for next fall and spring because they've been really successful. It's been great. I think people have appreciated having this as a platform to either come in person or recording it is very helpful, and that way people can just go back and listen. And
yeah, and this year it's been really a big point of interest has been like looking at the whole distance learning versus in person and how that all plays out, especially for our higher needs children, and looking at how the regression and the recoupment.
Hey guys, we're just going to give it a couple more seconds, then we'll get started.
I feel so bad I had to cancel that other one, but oh my goodness, COVID's tough.
Yeah. I'm glad you all are well now.
Oh, it took a while.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started this morning. I want to welcome you to our last webinar in our Special Education 101 series. We've had some really great advocates and consultants bring a wealth of their knowledge and on important topics like advocacy, autism, the autism supplements. And today we have Lorene Dillard with us, and she will be talking about transition planning. We're really grateful that we received funding from the Harvey E. Najum Charitable Foundation and the Mays Family Foundation to help us have these sessions. So we are really appreciative of that. Just some housekeeping, everybody's muted, video is off. And so if you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat or in the Q&A box, and we will address those at the end of the session. We are recording the presentation, so we can send you a link following the seminar, and you'll be able to share that with others. And also just a reminder that we have all of the sessions that we've been doing since last summer on our website. So, feel free to go back and look at some of those sessions. So I want to welcome Lorene Dillard and I. We've known each other for many, many years. And she's a married mother of 3 children, over 25 years of marriage. And she has 2 adult sons that are diagnosed with autism and a daughter also with multiple health challenges. And so professionally, she's been advocating for children with special needs for many, many years. She was in a senior leadership capacity, in a senior leadership position in a local nonprofit. She's assisted families in the juvenile court system. And so all of this has led her to start her own advocacy program, and it's flourishing. So I just want to welcome Lorene, and I'll go ahead and give it over to you, Lorene.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Hello, and thank you for joining. And first off, I want to apologize for having to reschedule. I'm not exactly sure how much was shared, but our family did experience COVID. So again, from that, we've all recovered, so that's wonderful. So I want to again thank you for joining me today to be able to share with you some of the information that I do have regarding looking at transition services and how it plays out. It does say I'm okay, and how it plays out within your student, as well as looking at how they transition into the school system into adult living. As Heather had already shared, I do have 2 adult children. I don't want to say children, but adult that are age 21 and 22. They both have a diagnosis of autism, as well as I work with many families in the community who also have adults that are looking at as they transition into adult living. So obviously I've worked within all the local school districts. I also work with families, who are transitioning into Texas, as we are a military city within San Antonio, as well as families who are transitioning out of Texas. So there are quite a bit of services that are available to you to help your student transition into the adult living, looking at how the school districts can be able to help you. So being able to get started, Heather, if you don't mind, it says that host disabled participant from screen sharing.
Okay, let me fix that here.
Awesome.
Okay, let me know if that works, Lorene.
All right, it appears to be perfect.
Okay.
Okay, so looking at, nope. All right, can everybody see my screen?
We don't see your PowerPoint. We see your
my face. Okay.
Yeah, we see your desktop.
Oh.
Looks like.
All right, let me see. Well, it does tell me that I am screen sharing.
Yeah, we see your screen.
You do see my screen?
Yeah, we see your screen, but it's not the presentation. So I think if you click on that where it says PowerPoint, or is that the PowerPoint for us at the top on the left?
Okay, let me get out of here.
If you want, I can do mine, Lorene.
If you don't mind, because for some reason mine doesn't seem to be working for me.
Okay, let me do it here.
Okay.
Let me start it here. Hold on one second. Okay, how's that? Do you see that?
Perfect. All right, thank you, Heather.
Just tell me when to click.
Okay, well, you can go on to the next one. All right. So for those of you who are looking on, and may or may not be familiar with the actual transition within your student's IEP, transition should begin no later than age 14. And I know that seems crazy because at age 14, I know like with you at age 14, I wasn't thinking about adult life. I was thinking about what I wanted to do as a kid at age 14. The reason why they want to be able to start looking at age 14 is because it is such a process to being able to look at what needs to be accomplished from age 14 to when your student is going to finish or exit out of the school system. Some students are going to be able to graduate at the typical age 18 or 17, 18 and graduate with looking at a certificate of completion or have completed the requirements, that are necessary. Or some students are going to be, in the school system until their 22nd birthday. But looking at what is going to be necessary is looking at designs to be results oriented. Please keep that in mind as we discuss, further, is results oriented, not just something down on paper. Look at post-secondary education. vocational education, integrated employment, including supported employment, continued and adult education, adult services, independent living, or community participation. Okay, next slide. Members of the transition team could, is again going to be individuals such as the child's parent or the LEA in which the child is enrolled. By age 17, again, not later than 1 year before the 18th birthday of the child with a disability, the LEA must comply. LEA meaning local education agency, which is going to be your school district, must comply with the adult, student, and transfer of rights framework, which we're going to talk about in the next slide. And by age 18 is invited to participate by the adult student or the LEA in which the adult student is enrolled, or has the student, as the adult student consent to participate for student to the supported decision-making agreement. And when a child with a disability reaches age 18, the LEA must comply with the adult student and transfer rights framework. Now, how is this different? Now, a lot of parents contact me because, again, they look at how when their child has turned 18 and maybe perhaps have disabilities that may be more significant, or looking at their needs being much higher, that they don't understand why the school district has stopped inviting them to their students' ARD meeting, but perhaps haven't pursued either a supported decision-making process or a guardianship process. And that may be because they haven't understood that age of majority or that transfer of adult rights. So this is going to be very important that you discuss with the school, and understanding that 1 year before, the school district is going to start that process to ensure that if you have not taken action, that they're going to already start that process to ensure that at the age 18, that your students' rights are going to be implemented as an adult. Next slide. Supported decision-making. The reason why I wanted to take just a bit of time to discuss this is such an important factor that's put into play that's been a little bit more recent, that a lot of parents are not quite aware of. And it's actually pretty interesting to me that the majority of parents that I speak to, when I've asked, have you, by chance maybe explored supported decision making, the immediate response I receive is, what's that? So, of course, understanding that supported decision-making is something that is honored by the school, and it is something that must be honored by the school. So those of you who may have an older student may have already perhaps explored guardianship, may have been able to come to the understanding that, one, it's quite expensive, two, that it's a long process, and it's something that maybe you're kind of still thinking about, because it does take away a lot of rights of your adult child. And so it's not something that you've necessarily quite decided is the correct decision for your child. And so you wanted to be able to look at other options to help ensure that you're still participating in those decisions regarding education. So the supported decision making, and I've included this information so that you would have that full opportunity to be able to know your rights. Then looking at that, subsection of 89-1049, why is this important? This is how it pertains to your rights in education. Is that under the Commissioner Rules Concerning Special Education Services, which was again updated March 2021, it does reiterate that nothing in this section prohibits a supported decision-making agreement or a valid power of attorney from being executed by an individual who holds rights under IDEA Part B. So what that means is that should your student enter into a supported decision maker with yourself, or again, a parent, somebody that they deem as somebody that they would like to be able to help them make those decisions, then that's something that again reiterates that the school district must honor that. So down below is a link that really gives you a lot of just really detailed information on what a supported decision maker is. It even gives you a worksheet that you might be able to sit down with your loved one to be able to discuss if this is the right decision for you and your family. So it's something that, again, as you discuss guardianship and just supported decision making, this is something that really isn't something that I think goes into lightly to say, am I ready to go into one or the other? One of the examples I often give is, as mentioned again before, I have two sons who both have the diagnosis of autism. So with one, my youngest son, Travis, who is 21 years old, his autism does require quite a bit more supports and services. Whereas my oldest son, Kyle, who's 22, his supports are pretty minor, and he's very capable of being able to make quite a bit of decisions on his own, but he does require, for the bigger decisions, some assistance with some financial planning, some assistance with purchasing, things like this. So understanding that, we did actually pursue guardianship with Travis, my younger son, due to his needs and his disability, and understanding that his disability was impacting so many facets of his just general life. Versus with Kyle, we pursued supported decision making, just to be able to put that support in place for him should he need or desire to have assistance. He had that layer of protection in place for him. Okay, next slide. This just, the reason why, and we can swiftly go through these, is just to give you just an overview of what the supported decision-making agreement looks like. The reason why I included these slides is most parents, when I speak to them, they kind of immediately are kind of standoffish, thinking that the supported decision-making process is going to be so very difficult, as well as overwhelming, when in fact it's actually pretty straightforward and pretty simple. And so it's something that you're able to go through with quite little assistance, and is able to just fill out. It doesn't require a whole lot of back support. It's something that can actually, you can just have a witness that is able to witness you signing it, or you can have it notarized, your choice. You can go to the next slide, Heather. As you'll see here, just again, Notary Public. You can go to the next page. And this here just continues to go on to say that this is an authorization to release confidential information. This is just if you want to continue to have additional releases on hand that you can give to medical providers, school personnel, as you'll see down here below, which again, school, personal use, treatment for continuing medical care, employment, legal purposes. If you'll continue. And again, here, it just gives you, opportunity to be able to be a little bit more specific. One of the things that I like about, in here is that I've done with my son, Kyle, is that you can place how long you would like to be able to have this supported decision maker in, place for you. Some, individuals might say, 5 years, 10 years. It may be, however, with, it's a personal choice. My personal choice with my son Kyle was that we placed a 3-year limitation on his, so that it forces us every 3 years to talk about it, so that it's something that, again, as he had said, he goes, Mom, can we just go ahead and not have a limit? Because I don't, I just would rather know that you're always going to be there for me. And as I discussed with him, and that's the reason why exactly I do want that 3-year limit, so that it forces you to actually have to talk about this with me, so that we can, again, look at whether or not these supports are going to be something that you truly are needing, or is it something that you're just looking at as a safety net. So it's something that, again, I want you to be able to make those decisions on your own for yourself and look at how this is going to be possible for you. Next slide. And again, next slide. These will be made available to you so you can have them again at any time. Guardianship, for those who may not be aware, just in general, guardianship is when a judge decides that a person with a disability cannot make their own decisions. The judge chooses a guardian, and a guardian is someone who makes decisions for you. Under guardianship, you can lose the rights to choose where you live, make medical decisions, choose where you work, drive, vote, get married, and more. So again, as you can see, guardianship is much more restrictive than supported decision making, but however, as understood, guardianship is going to be necessary for some, individuals. I will have to say my again, this is my personal experience as having both on my boys, is that having guardianship on Travis has not proven to be more beneficiary for us as the supported decision making on Kyle. So again, going through that process with Travis, you know, as expensive and time consuming and emotionally distressful, has not been any more beneficial than having the supported decision making that I have for Kyle. So, but again, that's just been our personal experience. Next slide. Now, as for the transition planning, again, it must consider child's strengths, preference, and interests and include instruction, related service. So again, just because your student is, you know, transitioning into adulthood and looking at that doesn't mean that, oh, guess what? You know, we're looking at adulthood and their child's getting older, so he doesn't need speech, occupational therapy, or physical therapy anymore. This is something that I often experience and often have to work with the school districts on, is that when a child is, you know, going from elementary to middle to high school, and then in high school they're going through transition, is that I see school districts trying to kind of, you know, back away from those related services versus looking at their evaluation, which again, their evaluation is what guides their actual needs, and looking at their needs, looking at their related services. So just because they're going through transition, that's something that looks at those related services. And as your student does move towards transition, as an example, if they're receiving assistive technology, you know, speech and language services, the team should be helping you as they're going to age out, secure those services outside of the school district. So again, if they're going to need an assistive technology device, they should be helping you secure that assistive technology device once they leave the school district, whether that be through some state grants and looking at how to achieve that for you. Community experiences, community-based instruction, which I know has been difficult under the pandemic. But again, as I'm going to show you some examples of some transition plans for families I've worked with, is that community-based instruction is something that needs to be looked at. How is that going to be recouped from that essential necessary skill that that student may have lost during that time as well? But again, community-based instruction is something that is necessary to being able to successfully transition a student out of working within the school district, because again, we understand that school is school, but the overall mission of any ISD is going to be to transition a student, whether they be special ed or general education, into successful, fruitful employment. Because again, the whole idea is either the student to be able to move from high school into college, or to be able to actually move from high school into gainful employment. The development of employment and or other post-school adult living objectives. So again, like I had mentioned, so again, some of our students are going to need to look at how they're going to move from their current living situation. So whether that be with mom, grandma, you know, I do have some students that are currently living in group homes. So how is that going to be, you know, necessarily once they leave the school district and receiving those services? How would that look once they are no longer receiving those services? What does their day look like? And so that's something that the school district should be assisting with, is saying that, okay, once school is over, how are we going to put into place a plan to help ensure that their day is filled? If appropriate, acquisition of daily living skills and provision of a functional vocational evaluation. That is something that's often not utilized, is looking at how to be able to really look at a vocational evaluation. A lot of students, and rightly so, don't know what they want to do. So there are those vocational evaluations that are available to them to be able to have the school actually do a full vocational evaluation where they can actually bring in a third party to do a formal evaluation to really be able to see what might be beneficial to this student to be able to help start that training process for them. Okay, next slide. Graduation plan. So looking at graduation plans for our students can be very difficult, because of course we have to look at, you know, what credits might be necessary, how are they going to fulfill those credits. You know, that's probably the most comprehensive piece for a lot of my parents because they're just so used to looking at the IEP and saying, okay, well, we're working on the IEP, but what credits do they necessarily have to achieve? So looking at the foundational high school program looks at demonstrational mastery of the required state standards of local educational agency, satisfactorily completes the credit requirements of graduation under the foundational program, and achieves satisfactory performance of the required state assessments. And again, understanding that the ARD committee can come together and say that we're going to vote that this individual does not have to pass that particular evaluation, or looking at, again, which would be the STAR test. So what does that necessarily look like? We all know that our students are going to be held to, looking at, modifications, accommodations within those required, English, math, and how is that going, science, social studies. Well, those standards are going to be looking at how those credits are achieved, even looking at foreign languages. Looking at the foreign language piece, students can, depending upon their disability, be exempted from actually having to fulfill a foreign language. So there are other course requirements that can be utilized in order to actually fulfill that foreign language requirement. So if you have a student who by chance is not going to be able to fulfill, as example, that foreign language requirement, the ARD committee can decide that that student is going to actually fulfill that requirement by taking an alternative course. And then looking at the English, science, social studies, in many cases, a lot of the students are attending what might be an alternative classroom setting, which might be a life skills class, which might be a behavioral class, might be attending a collaborative class with supports. Those passing requirements are something that, again, is decided within the ARD committee, and it's something that it looks at the overall performance and the teacher, and looking at the accommodations that are decided within the IEP. Next slide. Now, I thought this was going to come out a little bit bigger, so I apologize for this, but again, you will get copies of this. So looking at the transition services, this is an example of a transition plan requiring higher supports. So this plan in general looks at, again, for confidentiality purposes, I blanked out any identifiers within this, any of the particular plans. So looking at this plan, for those who are familiar and for those who may be not familiar quite yet, is going to look at, again, just the overall strengths, needs, preferences, interests. It's a general overview of the information that must be discussed in a transition plan. So why is this important? Because when you look at transition and whether or not a student is going to be able to actually graduate from a program, you have to be able to look at whether or not the student has actually mastered their IEP goals, which include their transition IEP goals. And again, going back to one of my first slides when I had mentioned, you have to be able to say that whether or not that it was something that was results oriented. So looking at this transition plan, you have to also include and ensure that the individual themselves was involved in this transition plan. So many a times when I come in and look at a transition plan, originally, without, when a parent first contacts me, is that I will often notice that perhaps a student or a parent wasn't even involved in the actual original transition plan. It was something that perhaps the teacher has just filled in based off of their knowledge of the student without actually taking information from the parent or including the student to the best of their ability. So such things as an example with this particular student, when choosing course selections, this particular student, for example, PE, they had just gone ahead and listed that the student was going to take PE, not realizing that there were other options that the student could do to be able to fulfill those credits, such things as dance. So one of the accommodations that I had requested was that her teacher, which was in the life skills class, actually sit with her and go over videos of the different options that she could be able to participate in, which would be, participating in band, participating in PE, participating in dance. so on and so forth. Well, after that particular activity was performed, this student chose that she wanted to be able to participate in dance in order to fulfill her PE credit. So these are accommodations that, again, you can ask to be fulfilled. So next slide. Looking at, okay, so of course here it's going to be looking at course studies. These are the actual course studies that need to be able to be fulfilled. I wanted to come down and talk about down here where it discusses whether or not this individual would need to be able to have community experiences. Down here, it does benefits from experiences within the community, has limited access with the group home and during scheduled visits with family, and within the opportunities to attend community-based outings that focus on academic and functional skills in regard to safety and finances. So again, the school district felt it necessary to add in that due to the pandemic, state and local district policies and guidelines, the outings basically had been something that was put on hold. But it was a discussion that I felt necessary to have, that this individual in particular, outings were very important to her, so much so that because she wasn't having them, it was something that resulted in behaviors. Looking at the actual appropriate acquisition of daily living skills, that she would be able to maintain and follow a daily schedule of routine and continue with speech services instruction and provide the components of healthy lifestyle choices, exercise, etc., and appropriate pro-social behavior. Next slide, please. So looking at, again, as we had talked about, how this facilitates the movement towards post-secondary goal. So looking at behavior and social skills that would function as the adult appears in the community after post-secondary graduation. One of the things that, again, looking at how this individual and how their caregivers or guardians, looking at what was important to them, this particular individual, the goals were set for her to be able to work in a sheltered work area where, perhaps that may not be something that is appropriate for everyone. For this particular family, it was important to them. So that was something that the school district was working towards, trying to help her get those appropriate skills due to her behaviors. So again, looking at those particular behaviors, that was something that was particularly addressed within this transition plan itself. Something that was very important to her as well is that she wanted to be able to do nails after she graduated. So that was something that was more of a passion for her and something that she wanted to be able to continue with. So this is a discussion that we had with the school on what could be able to be done to be able to help pursue that for her, because that was a skill set that she wanted to be able to continue with. Next slide. Now, this is a transition plan example for a student who required very minor supports. So this individual was somebody that after graduating high school had plans to attend a community college and receive an education to be able to go into construction management field. And of course, they look at the living arrangements, which was to be able to attend college while continuing to live at home. So the strengths within this individual was feedback initiated that was accommodating for extra time. And of course, looking at instruction, education, that he passed his English, algebra, so on and so forth. This particular student academically was doing very, very well and continued to do very, very well. When you look at the actual transition plan, always know that this is an area that you have immense ability to have feedback. For an example, the needs section of this transition plan had some information in it prior to our meeting that had quite a bit of negative information that the parent and myself did not agree with whatsoever, because it was based off of one or two observations that were done on the student versus a collective amount of data that was done over the course of the school year. So of course, you want to make sure that going into a transition, you want to have a full course of information of the student versus, you know, looking at just maybe 1 or 2 observations of the student, because that's not going to give you a holistic picture of the student, and certainly wouldn't give you a good plan for helping your student transition into adult life. So we were able to get into such things as using a timer to manage on-task behaviors for work completion with, and of course, incorporating a break time. Next slide. So looking at, you know, including core studies, he'll receive specialized instruction in his core academics, and looking at, he'll maintain and follow a daily schedule, that he was also going to be able to, the functional vocational evaluation was not needed at the time. Work-related behaviors provide strategies for time management and completion. Because again, time management, this particular student was very challenged with just executive functioning skills. And so, of course, with that, one of the biggest areas that we talked about was really assisting this individual with being able to come up with the time management and organization strategy. So benefits from experiences within the community, but he has limited I actually think I may have cut and paste an incorrect slide in here, which I apologize. But if you'll go to the next one, and I'll just discuss this individual's within it. So he did attend the ARD and participated in the discussion and post-secondary goal and planned to reach the goal. After the ARD committee, we discussed the transition plan. Within this transition plan for this particular student, one of the things that you want to definitely keep your eye on, transition goals tend to get looked over quite heavily. And so that's something that you really want to hold the schools accountable for, because as we came back to ARD for this particular student, we did notice that his transition goal actually hadn't been worked on at all. So of course, when the school district wanted to report it, they reported that he had made progress on it. But when we actually had the discussion in the ARD meeting and asked for the actual meeting dates that were to have occurred within the actual college counselor, there were no meeting dates that could be provided. So therefore, it was understood that that particular IEP goal had not even been worked on. So when it comes to transition goals, they tend to be very broad, and that's something that the school district will often present to the parents, is something that is very broad, and saying that we like to have them broad so that we can work on a variety of things with the student. But as I have worked within the schools for so many years, I have not yet seen a broad transition goal that actually gets addressed appropriately. The more specific that you can make it, whether it be a broad IEP goal with objectives that hit the specifics, or making multiple IEP goals that actually address the specific needs of the student, really is the best way to go, so that you do ensure that you're able to meet your child's need. Next slide. So this looks at the resources that you can access to be able to get some additional information, you know, to be able to look at, you know, just transition in general. Looking at the Texas Education Agency, Transition in Texas, Vocational Rehabilitation Persons for Mental and Physical Disability, Department of Assistive and Rehabilitative Services, Texas Council for Developmental Disabilities. As for looking at an overall generalized statement for transitioning a student out of the school into adult living, is that transition plan is something that, again, you want to ensure has specific plans in place for actually ensuring that your child is able to make that results-oriented progress and step from school into adult living. I will have to say, probably one of the concerns I get as well is that some school districts tend to want to graduate students at age 18 because they just do. There isn't a particular rhyme or reason. I get a call from a parent that in tears saying that the school has decided that they're going to graduate their student, and the parent is completely confused because they come back to me and say, my child can't read, they can't write. It doesn't seem as if they're ready to graduate, but the school has said that they're done. But yet again, after looking at their IEP, I can see what happened is that the IEP goals have been met, the transition goals have been met. It is something that, based on what the school district has put into place, all of the criteria has been met for that student to have graduated. So what you want to ensure, looking at it from, if your desire is for your student to be able to receive the maximum benefit from the school district, is to ensure that what you're looking to receive from the school based upon the services and supports are truly outlined in your student's plan. So ensuring that you participate in that IEP process. So if there are certain goals and objectives that you want your child to achieve, and perhaps the school district is proposing 2 goals for your student, this is the time for you to speak up and propose additional goals, to propose those additional 2, 3 goals that you want your child to achieve, to propose that your child have a higher success rate versus 70% because your child is already perhaps at 50% accuracy. So you want to ensure that your child is able to receive those particular services. If your child is using an augmentative communication device, has the school secured those sources or resources for you outside of the school district to help ensure that they're transitioning appropriately? Have they been able to help secure employment or independent living outside of the school so that your child can successfully transition? Have all of those checkpoints been met for you? And I think I left maybe just enough time for questions.
Okay, let me get myself back on screen here. I don't know what I did. Like I said, technology, huh?
I know.
All righty. Okay, so if anybody has any questions for Lorene, please type those up in the chat box. And this has been great information, Lorene. One of the questions I had was, do you ever have families, or do they ever ask you about starting the transition process earlier than 14? I know it's a hard, I know it's the school is required at age 14, but do you see any of the districts stepping up and starting that sooner?
No.
Would you recommend that, or can they?
Well, there's some verbiage that discusses it for children who are on the spectrum, that at age 12, that it should begin.
Okay,
So again, from that, unless that is a factor in play, typically, again, based upon the rules, it is, and we all understand that based on the schools, they're not going to do something that's not specifically outlined within the rules and regulations. They're not required to do it until age 14. So because it's going to be deemed as inappropriate. So of course, with that understanding, I think it's good though to have a discussion and have it documented within the deliberations that the parents have opened that for discussion, and that there are some areas that the parents are already discussing as an area of need or an area of interest, so that it is documented in the child's IEP.
great. And then, you had talked about schools trying to graduate students early and adding, looking at adding additional goals. Is there a resource that helps families with writing those goals? Is there anything that maybe we could send our listeners to, some links or resources to help them with, thinking of other goals that could be addressed that maybe they're not thinking of in terms of like the community living and adult living?
Right offhand, I can actually put some and send them to you, or even make them available on my website.
Okay,
So there's a variety of them. Right offhand, the best website I can think of that you can do search engines that have great resources for that would be rightslaw.com.
okay,
And
perfect.
so they are going to have just a plethora of information within that will be able to have such things as like community living, goals, things like that.
Perfect. All right. Well, we haven't had any other questions come through. So I think you just answered everybody's question, Lorene. You just know everything. But before we end, just tell the folks a little bit about what you do, what your business is, and how you support families.
Well, I started this back in 2014, just as I left working with that local nonprofit, just because, again, it was something that I started getting contacted by families that I had worked with previously and wanted to be able to stay involved to some, extent and be able to work around the schedules of my kids. My passion is very much there working with families as being a mom myself of, children with disabilities and being able to see in which way I can help. Most of what I enjoy doing obviously is being able to help with the ARD process and being able to help ensure that families are fully informed of what their rights are and being able to help attend, those meetings with them, as well as just going over paperwork and ensuring that, I'm able to answer questions, looking at 504 plans, being able to, one of the things that I often am asked to help with as well, I don't typically like to do it as often, is help with due process, being able to help parents transition in and out of Texas. Looking at the juvenile justice system, a lot of parents are challenged with their children being disciplined to the point of having the law enforcement called on them while they're attending school. And so helping with behavior and behavioral management and ensuring that the appropriate behavioral intervention plans are done and ensuring that functional behavioral assessments are handled correctly within the school district based on the regulations. So it's a plethora of things. I do also try to help parents with ensuring that I kind of source them out correctly to the agencies that may help them with ensuring that they're receiving the correct state services and that appropriately fit the needs of their family. So just a variety of things. It's really, my website's probably the best way to get information.
Yeah, very informative. Yes. And we'll include that. We'll include your contact information, your website information, the PowerPoint, a link to this webinar recording to everybody today. All right. So, I really appreciate your time, Lorene. Thank you so much. And
of course,
this is our last in our Special Education 101 series. So I'm a little sad, but we'll, but we're going to look at doing another series next fall and spring, just addressing disability awareness and make it like a lunch and learn webinar session. So we're excited about that. We are going to bring our Planning for the Future series back in person on Saturdays starting next fall, or starting this fall. So we're happy about that. And so I just again want to thank the Harvey E. Najum Foundation and the Mays Family Foundation for helping to fund our webinars. And I hope everybody has a fabulous weekend.
Yes.
Okay. All right. You guys have a great weekend, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Lorene.